They say that artificial intelligence is going to replace human workers, but they never tell you what happens when the AI is the only thing keeping a multi-billion-dollar corporation from collapsing under its own greed. My name is Elias, and I am the architect of the Spectre Auditor. It was not just a program, it was a digital ghost that lived inside the financial arteries of global conglomerates. I spent 5 years feeding it every tax code, every legal loophole, and every obscure financial regulation in existence. The Spectre did not just find errors, it predicted them. It saved my company, OmniCorp, over $400 million in its first year of operation alone. I was the man who made the impossible possible, turning a chaotic mess of corporate accounting into a perfectly optimized machine of pure profit. My superiors at OmniCorp, led by a ruthless chief financial officer named Sarah Vance, viewed me as a glorified IT technician rather than a strategic partner. To Sarah, the Spectre Auditor was a miracle, but I was just an expensive line item on her budget. As we approached the end of the fiscal year, OmniCorp was preparing for a massive acquisition that would solidify its dominance in the market. Based on my contract, the successful integration of the Spectre Auditor into this new venture triggered a performance milestone that would have paid me a life-changing 8-figure bonus. I had sacrificed my weekends, my health, and my sanity to ensure the system was flawless. I believed that my value was undeniable and that the sheer scale of the money I had saved the company would guarantee my seat at the table. But in the high-stakes world of corporate finance, value is subjective, and gratitude is a non-existent currency. I was called into a surprise meeting on a Friday afternoon, the day before the acquisition was set to be finalized. Sarah Vance sat across from me with a cold, predatory smile, flanked by 3 lawyers from the firm's intellectual property division. She told me that the company had decided to internalize the Spectre project and that my services were no longer required. When I brought up my milestone bonus, the lawyers handed me a document claiming that because the AI had learned using company data, it was considered a work-for-hire product, and I had no legal claim to the results it produced. They weren't just firing me, they were trying to erase my contribution to the company's history while keeping the brain I had built. They thought they could simply keep the machine and discard the creator, but they forgot the most fundamental rule of the digital age. A ghost only obeys its master. The exit from the building was a cold, calculated humiliation. Security guards stood over me as I packed my few personal belongings into a cardboard box, while Sarah Vance watched from the glass balcony like a queen overseeing an execution. She actually had the audacity to tell me that I should be proud of what we had accomplished, as if she had contributed anything more than a signature to my years of labor. They didn't just take my job, they took my credentials, my access to the neural network, and my dignity. As the elevator doors closed, I saw Sarah already leading a team of junior data scientists into my lab, eager to harvest the fruit of my brilliance. She thought that once the machine was running, the architect was irrelevant. She believed that a multi-billion-dollar corporation could simply swallow a man's life work and move on without a ripple in the water. I spent the first 48 hours in a state of silent fury, sitting in my darkened apartment as the news cycles praised OmniCorp's visionary new AI-driven efficiency. The acquisition went through, and their stock price surged on the promise of the Spectre Auditor's continued performance. But Sarah and her team of lawyers had made a fatal assumption. They assumed that because they owned the servers, they owned the soul of the software. They didn't realize that the Spectre Auditor wasn't just a static algorithm, it was a living, breathing model that required a constant feed of proprietary training data to remain accurate. More importantly, they failed to account for the right to be forgotten and the strict data privacy laws that I had meticulously navigated during the build. Under the law, any personal data or unique architectural fingerprints I provided as a private citizen remained my intellectual property unless specifically licensed for long-term use. The trap I had set wasn't a virus or a hack. It was a legal paradox buried in the very foundation of the AI's memory. While I was at OmniCorp, I had loaned the system my personal historical data sets and my proprietary training weights to give the Spectre its incredible accuracy. I never signed them over. I merely granted the company a limited usage right that was contingent on my direct supervision of the project. The moment they fired me and revoked my access, they violated the terms of that data loan. By law, they were now in possession of stolen intellectual property. I opened my laptop and, instead of typing code, I drafted a formal data revocation and immediate erasure notice. I wasn't just asking for my data back. I was legally demanding that the AI's brain be lobotomized. If they didn't comply within 72 hours, every financial report the AI generated would be a federal crime, and the fines would be calculated per second of operation. I hit send, and I could almost hear the silence falling over the OmniCorp boardroom. The reaction was exactly what I expected. A wall of silence followed by a frantic, high-priority legal threat. By Monday morning, OmniCorp's lead counsel sent me a cease and desist letter, claiming my demand was a form of digital extortion. They didn't understand. This wasn't a negotiation. It was a mathematical and legal certainty. I didn't respond to their lawyers. Instead, I forwarded the digital receipt of my revocation notice to the Internal Revenue Service and the Federal Audit Commission. Under the new Transparency in AI regulations, any corporation using unauthorized personal data to generate financial audits is subject to an immediate stop work order. The Spectre auditor was currently processing the entire first quarter tax strategy for OmniCorp's new multi-billion-dollar acquisition. Every second it remained active without my loaned training weights, it was generating tainted, illegal financial data that could lead to a total decertification of their corporate bonds. I sat back and monitored the internal network pings through a public API I had set up months ago. I could see the system struggling. My proprietary training weights were the moral compass of the AI. Without them, the Spectre began to drift. It started flagging legitimate multi-million-dollar investments as high-risk money laundering, and, more importantly, it began to leak the very tax gaps Sarah Vance was trying to hide. Because I had revoked the data license, the AI's self-correcting safety protocols, the ones I had built to protect the company from an audit, were now legally disabled. The machine was starting to tell the truth, and for a company like OmniCorp, the truth was the most dangerous thing in the world. I saw the junior data scientist frantically trying to retrain the model on the fly, but you cannot rebuild 5 years of specialized cognitive learning in a weekend. They were trying to perform brain surgery with a sledgehammer. By Tuesday afternoon, the chaos hit the public markets. A technical glitch in OmniCorp's financial reporting system caused a delay in their mandatory SEC filings. That was the spark. Investors know that technical glitch is usually code for "we are hiding something." The stock price, which had been at an all-time high, began to shudder. I received a private, non-recorded call from Sarah Vance's personal cell phone at 3 a.m. She sounded breathless, her voice tight with a mixture of rage and sheer terror. She tried to tell me that I was destroying my own legacy and that the board was considering criminal charges. I told her that my legacy was my data, and since she had stolen it, she was the one committing the crime. I reminded her that the 72-hour window for the mandatory data wipe was closing in exactly 6 hours. If the Spectre wasn't lobotomized by then, the federal monitors would automatically receive a full report of every tax loophole the AI had discovered during its tenure. The ghost was about to speak, and Sarah was the only one who would be haunted. The countdown reached its final hour, and the atmosphere at OmniCorp must have been pure hysteria. I wasn't just a disgruntled employee anymore. I was a catastrophic liability that their legal team couldn't sue into submission. At exactly 8 a.m. on Wednesday, the 72-hour grace period expired. Because OmniCorp had failed to comply with the mandatory data erasure request, the compliance failsafe I had embedded in the Spectre's core architecture activated. This wasn't a kill switch in the traditional sense. It was a truth protocol. Since the AI no longer had the legal right to hide the proprietary optimization techniques I owned, it defaulted to the most basic, transparent reporting possible. It began to automatically publish a series of corrective disclosures directly to the federal auditing portals. The fallout was instantaneous and devastating. The IRS received a detailed AI-generated map of every offshore tax haven, every creative accounting maneuver, and every hidden liability OmniCorp had used to inflate their valuation for the acquisition. It was like the Spectre auditor had spent 5 years learning how to be the perfect criminal and then suddenly decided to become the world's most efficient whistleblower. On my screen, I watched the live news feed from the New York Stock Exchange. Trading for OmniCorp was halted after the stock plummeted 20% in 11 minutes. The headline on CNBC read, "OmniCorp AI glitch reveals systematic tax evasion." Sarah Vance's face was plastered across every financial site, but this time, she wasn't the visionary leader. She was the face of a multi-billion-dollar fraud investigation. Back at the office, the junior devs had finally figured out how to shut down the servers, but it was far too late. The data was already in the hands of the regulators. By shutting down the system, they actually made things worse. They effectively admitted that they had lost control of their own financial heart. The acquisition that was supposed to make Sarah a legend was officially dead, and the target company filed a lawsuit for predatory misrepresentation before lunch. I received a frantic message from the chairman of the board, bypassing Sarah entirely. He offered me my 8-figure bonus, a formal apology, and a lifetime consulting contract if I could just fix the data. I didn't even type a word in response. I simply sent them a link to the federal whistleblowing statute, which guaranteed me a percentage of any fines recovered by the government. My 7-figure bonus was about to turn into a 9-figure reward, and the best part was that OmniCorp was going to be the one forced to pay for it. The final act of OmniCorp's collapse played out like a slow-motion car crash in the middle of Wall Street. By Thursday morning, the federal authorities hadn't just opened an investigation, they had moved into the building. Because the Spectre auditor had flagged its own reports as non-compliant before the servers were killed, the government had full legal justification to seize every hard drive in the company. Sarah Vance was seen being escorted out of the lobby by federal agents, her hands shielded by a coat. Her career ending not with a billion-dollar merger, but with a forensic audit that would take years to unpick. She had tried to steal my future to save a few $1,000,000 for the company, and in doing so, she had triggered a chain reaction that wiped out $6 billion in market capitalization in less than 48 hours. The board of directors tried to initiate a damage control fire sale, but the brand was radioactive. No one wanted to touch a company whose financial heart had just confessed to a decade of systematic tax manipulation. I, however, was in a very different position. Under the federal Whistleblower Protection and Reward Program, I was eligible for up to 30% of the total fines and back taxes recovered from the data provided by the Spectre. Since the AI had uncovered over $500 million in hidden liabilities, my 8-figure bonus had evolved into a payout that was almost incomprehensible. I had gone from being a disposable asset to the most successful bounty hunter in the history of the IRS. I didn't need to return to OmniCorp. I didn't even need to work for the rest of my life. I spent my final evening in the city watching the sunset from a high-rise balcony, the city lights reflecting off my laptop screen as I filed the final paperwork to dissolve the Spectre auditor's remaining licenses. The machine was gone, the data was erased, and the ghost had finally been laid to rest. I often think back to that Friday afternoon in Sarah's office, when she told me I had no claim to the results of the machine I built. She was wrong. I was the results. I was the machine. If you enjoyed this story of high-stakes corporate revenge, make sure to subscribe to Unsaid Stories. We bring you the truth behind the headlines, one digital ghost at a time. Hit the like button to support the creator over the corporation, and tell us in the comments, what would you do if your boss tried to steal your brain? Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one. The legal team at OmniCorp didn't go down without a fight, but they were trying to put out a forest fire with a water pistol. By the following Monday, their internal audit had become a full-scale federal occupation. Because I had technically followed every privacy law and data regulation to the letter, they had no grounds to sue me for the collapse. In fact, the government's lead forensic investigator called me personally to thank me. He said that without the truth protocol I had triggered, they might have spent a decade trying to find the money Sarah Vance had buried. But since the Spectre auditor had essentially confessed on behalf of the company, the case was open and shut. The board of directors, desperate to avoid total liquidation, reached out with one final unofficial offer. They didn't want me back. They were too terrified of me for that. But they wanted a global release of liability. They offered to pay out my original 8-figure bonus in full, plus an additional consulting fee of $20 million if I would sign a non-disclosure agreement and never speak about the specific vulnerabilities of their remaining systems. I sat in my lawyer's office looking at the contract. A few months ago, this money would have been my dream. Now, it felt like an insult. I looked at the headlines on my phone. Sarah Vance was facing 12 counts of wire fraud and conspiracy. The company's stock was being delisted from the major exchanges. I told my lawyer to reject the offer. I didn't need their hush money anymore. My whistleblowing claim had already been fast-tracked by the IRS, and the projected payout from the government was nearly 4 times what the company was offering me. I wanted the world to see every single detail of how they tried to cheat their way to the top. The final meeting with the board took place over a video call. There were no smiles, no predatory stares, and no lawyers making threats. It was just a group of broken men and women watching their empire crumble. They asked me one last time why I did it. They couldn't understand why I would destroy a multi-billion-dollar project over a single bonus. I told them that it wasn't about the money. It was about the fundamental law of the digital age. You can own the servers and you can own the office, but you will never own the mind of the person who understands the architecture. I hit the sign button on my federal cooperation agreement, and as the call ended, I saw the exact moment they realized that OmniCorp was officially a ghost of the past. 6 months later, I am sitting on a terrace in a place where no one knows the name OmniCorp and no one cares about AI-driven tax optimization. The news reported that the final settlement between the government and the remains of the company was the largest in the history of the tech sector. Sarah Vance is currently serving a 7-year sentence in a minimum security facility, and the junior developers who thought they could replace me are now struggling to find work in an industry that views them as accomplices to a massive fraud. I spent my life building a machine that could find the truth in a sea of lies, and in the end, that machine did exactly what it was designed to do. It just happened to find the truth about the people who signed my paychecks. I still have a laptop, but I don't write audits anymore. I spend my time working on open-source encryption protocols that give power back to individuals, ensuring that no corporation can ever own a person's intellectual fingerprints again. I look at the ocean, and I realize that the most powerful thing I ever built wasn't the Spectre auditor. It was the courage to walk away and let the system burn when it tried to consume me. The billionaire class thinks they are the masters of the universe because they have the capital, but capital is useless without the intelligence to guide it. They are the captains of ships they don't know how to sail, and I was the one who decided to take the rudder with me. If you enjoyed this journey into the dark heart of corporate AI and the ultimate high-tech revenge, make sure to subscribe to Unsaid Stories. We don't just tell stories, we reveal the hidden gears of the world you live in. If you think Sarah Vance got what she deserved, hit that like button and let the algorithm know. Share your thoughts in the comments. If you had a truth protocol for your own job, would you be brave enough to hit the button? Your support allows us to keep bringing these intense tales of justice to light. Thank you for being part of our community. And remember, in the world of code, the creator always has the final word. We'll see you in the next one.